Okay.
Okay, great. So we're going to get started. What we're going to do is go through a quick overview of what was discussed at the table session last week. We'll talk about the pros and cons of each of the sessions that maybe we did or did not go to. Then the second part of the meeting, I'd like to talk about the questions that were actually sent in by a few of you, so that we can agree on the ones that we want posted on behalf of the FAC to the FAC site, so the FAQ versus the FAC. And then the last part of the meeting, we'll talk about what we're going to kind of drill down into, or what we'd like to drill down into for the next meeting in 2 weeks. So that's kind of the agenda. We're going to try to take, let's see, it's 6:38. We'll try to take 10 minutes or less on this, maybe 5. And then we'll get into the questions. Sorry, it's an alarm. Okay. So I'll try to go through this, Michael. If I get anything wrong, let me know. A couple days ago, on the 31st, we had the Pre-CIP Report table sessions. APS gave an overview of this. It was at Lisa Stengel, I think, gave the brief.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went into breakout sections for the 4 main topics: swing space, middle school boundaries, long-range planning. The fourth.
There were only 3.
Yeah, that's it. That was it.
Oh, there are only 3. Okay, sorry.
Yep.
For some reason, oh, that's right. There are 3, and you can only go to 2 sessions. Okay. And then there's other things. I will update the FAC right now and say that Rosa couldn't be here tonight. Rosa and I had a great meeting with Mary Cadera, who's the FAC sponsor from the school board this year. We talked about things that she'd like to cover as part of our guidance, as well as things that we can cover on behalf of the board, and some advice and assistance that we'll give throughout the year on the actual CIP guidance when it's voted on. So that happened 2 days ago. And Michael, I've asked you to invite her to every meeting that we have. She may or may not make it, but at least she'll know when they occur. One thing I would like to do, I think, and I'd like to run this by the FAC later on, is once long-range planning guidance comes out and is published in September, our first meeting ideally will focus on that. And then what I'd really like to do is look at the worst schools this year as we're looking at the CIP. And when I say look at them, I mean, if they rank high on the renovation list, then I think those are the places that we should have our FAC meetings for the rest of the year. Just a suggestion. Okay, so that's the preamble. As far as the table sessions, there were 2 rotations for the 3 topics, so people could choose one of the 3. Is it starting? I think it starts at 6:45. Why don't you go downstairs and find out, and I'll be right back. Sorry.
We had a question.
Go this way.
Adam?
Who's got a question?
Charlie had a question in the chat.
Adam, do you have a question? Oh, Mary's concerned priorities. Yeah.
I had a question. I know I would like, you just kind of said she had some priorities and laid some thoughts out. I just was curious if you could expand a little more on that.
Yeah, Kelly,
absolutely.
some of the stuff that you're
go
trying
ahead.
to summarize, I think all of us know it and don't need to know it. So there are the 3 big
right.
areas, and we don't need to know that we're 2 breakouts, and what we don't need to know that if you're trying to get
Okay,
done in
great.
an hour.
Thank you, Cynthia. That's great advice. Okay, so we had the breakout sessions. There's another one coming up in person in a couple of weeks. We'll close it there. There were several comments that I think are going to be posted on the FAC site. Speaking of what Mary had as a priority, great question. I'm just going to go to an email that I received from her just to give you a flavor. There it is. I won't share, but what I will say is some of the areas where she thinks the FAC could be particularly valuable to the school board. One is how APS could prioritize the long-term renovation work that needs to be done. Are there factors that should weigh more heavily than others, like indoor air quality versus adequacy of common space, length of time since the last major renovation, access issues, and other, included items? Is it better to go down, we talked about, is it better to go down the list, like start with the worst shape one that needs the, that needs the lightest touch or the highest touch? Or is there some other way to organize this? Would you look at 3 at a time and just see if you can spread the love for 3 mid-sized projects and then do a big one? So there's some, questions about order there. she just doesn't know if, if staff is already thinking of this question or not, and then where our previous work kind of suggested this could go. Another topic area she was looking at is how should APS identify
Kelly,
sites
before
for
you
toxic-
get away from that, can I just ask a point of clarification? So I'm a little bit confused here
Sure.
because I thought the grid, the framework, whatever you want to call it, that we put together was providing that priority and that weighting. So when she says, gee whiz, I'd like to know, and oh, by the way, I really care about air quality and the length and, access. I mean, are they not already weighted so that they would kind of float to the top or not in the framework we already provided? Because if they have, and then anybody can come in and say, oh, gee whiz, I really care about this, then it seems to me that our attempt to rationalize and whatever just goes out the window. Just saying.
Right. No, I agree, Cynthia. And what I would say is Mary's the newest school board member, so she wasn't part of the process that when they voted on it. So, and I don't know how much she's actually dug into it. I can't speak to that. What I will say is we did go through that priority. We did go through the grid. We did provide that criteria, and the consultant should be providing back to us their recommendations. And I would imagine how it's going to be presented. What I would like to know, Michael, because I remember talking about whether or not things are weighted or not weighted. And we talked about, do we do an unweighted comparison versus a weighted comparison? And I missed the meeting last year where they actually came and spoke. So could you, Michael, just speak to that for 30 seconds to a minute and say, like, this is what we should expect in September? Is it weighted? Is it not? Did they put them in priority order? Did they not? And so on.
Right. So each of the different components that have been identified, right, whether it's being part of the built environment or whether it's being an observational measurement, is just as such. It measures it based on its expected lifespan. So you would have a component, let's say something similar to the HVAC. And is that HVAC, where does it sit within its lifespan? Does it need to be completely replaced? Does it need to just have a little bit of work done on it in order to make it, MERV 11 or MERV 13 compatible? They do all that on their end, and then they score it based on whether or not it needs a lot of work or whether it needs no work. And then that's how it is. That's it. Each one of those different ones, and I mean, I just don't know them all off the top of my head, but it's quite a few, are scored, let's say, that way. And it is up to staff and I imagine the FAC, because we talked about this last year and I pushed for the school board to be the ones that would want to do this sort of prioritization. But I guess it would have to be staff and the FAC that say, okay, these are the facilities that have the most red issues, right? These are the facilities that have the most green issues, red being bad, green being good. And that's how we would have to go ahead and sort of prioritize them.
Yeah, and Kelly, my understanding was that this was, again, to take the politics, if you will, because I'm being brain dead and not thinking whatever out of it. Because if you had a school with a whole bunch of red versus a school with a little bit of red, it would make more sense that, the priority would be the school with a whole bunch of red, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct. And exactly that, Cynthia. It was to take the politics out of it, and it was to ensure that when you think about how this thing is ranked, those criteria were the ones that were ideally the most important. And so I don't take Mary's comments as trying to relitigate this. I think it's more of a clarification. And once the recommendations are made, it's more of a, how do you approach it in terms of, do you do the biggest worst problem up front, right? Most of us might say, many of us might say yes. But what if there are the next three schools, like the worst one's just bad, and the next three schools you could all do in the same year and they're in different parts of the county? would you make that choice instead and then move the worst school 5 years down the road? So I think it's a spacing and timing issue. But most importantly, and not to get too bogged down in the issue, I think we're waiting to see what happens with the long range planning guidance recommendation. And once we see that, I think it'll be clear how we should address it.
Yeah, because I just want to say one of the messages that I heard loud and clear through that exercise was that there are communities in the county that are much more active. They're much more, they know people on the board. They can pick up the phone. They can say, you know, this, that, or the other should be, and they can get attention. There are other areas of the county that don't have that skill set, and they can be really easily overlooked. And I think this was an effort to try to give cover, for lack of a better word, to the school board, that they would choose to address issues at some school where, you know, the political connectiveness, whatever is missing. And, you know, if someone doesn't step up and be a spokesperson for them, no one's going to hear from them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was kind of that was actually discussed too. Like, and I think this was actually discussed, I don't know if this was discussed in the meeting, but let's just take Nottingham as an example of swing space. You know, when you look at the way the APS laid it out in the pre-CIP guidance, you can see very clearly that the north is way under in terms of filling seats, and the south is overcrowded. And arguably the schools in the north are nicer than the schools in the south for a variety of reasons and past construction projects. So Nottingham is a very local community, as all communities would be if their school was chosen to be swing space. So now there's some danger if you don't look at the long range planning guidance and actually take that into account, like as a level playing field with an independent arbiter, and say these are the top 10 worst schools, and let's just, for a hypothetical, say none of them are in the north. Okay, so if none of them are in the north and we went and worked at a northern school, that would be a problem. Or, hey, okay, fine, this community is very vocal, they don't want their thing to be swing space, we're not using Nottingham, we're going to use a school in the south. Well, that's just going to look, again, political. So ideally, at least the way I hope this process goes, is the long-range planning guidance that our subcommittee put together 2 years ago, that's now being implemented by the consultant, will then be published and clear enough that it gives a solid recommendation, and then the FAC, ideally us being the citizen advisory board for the school board, could take a look at it, an unvarnished look at it, and say, okay, this matched the criteria, we agree with how it went through, or we don't, here's some things that we might want to think about. I think that's where Mary was going with her statement. I don't think there's anything underneath in terms of, you know, changing the recommendation. I think it was more help the school board get more views, you know, and thoughts from the community, right? We're the ones that have the public commentation.
Hey Kelly, can we move on? I mean, I mean to do it, but I think we got your point.
Sure, no worries. Just trying to answer the question. So let's go to the just as other items that we could look at this year. Should APS identify sites for option programs? There's no logical consistency. Was one of, you know, currently Mary didn't really feel like there was logical consistency. You know, should they be centrally located? Should they be transit accessible? You know, should they be located in parts of the county where there's excess capacity? Do they have a forever home, or do families understand that they're movable? Another item was for next spring, you know, feedback on the boundary policy. You know, should the current 6 factors be kept, or should they be revised? Should we be clear about whether and how they're weighted in terms of how you move and what you do with boundaries? Another item was ranking the tools to manage enrollment. Rosa had made this point. How would FAC members rank the tools that do manage enrollment? You know, and doing it in such a way that, it's, you know, if you were a parent, how would you feel about, you know, this category? What about from the perspective of the student? What about the perspective from the staff? What about the perspective from the community? And then same thing with ranking of how, you know, what's a PU? PUs are established planning units. You know, which factors matter most, and trying to take that view of like, okay, this is what I think, but how would a student feel about this? You know, a student, a community, and you know, a school. So anyway, much longer than I wanted to spend on this, but the idea is those are some thoughts from our board sponsor. We'll have others, and we'll come up with a good agenda for what we want to do for the year. But just keep in mind that this year, after the summer, after we give our report back or our feedback on this pre-CAPI guidance, it will be focused on the CIP guidance and whatever the board wants us to look at. Okay, questions on that? Okay, thank you. Let's move to this next section of the meeting then, and assume that would have been the section that we spent talking about, you know, what happened in the CIP meetings. There's another one coming up. You can watch the recording. Let's go to the questions, Michael, if you wouldn't mind. If you have them, great. If not, I can bring them up. What would you prefer?
The questions that you sent in?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have them.
Okay. What I'd like to do is just go through as a group and talk about the questions. And since we have Cynthia here, maybe we could start with her questions and then I'll cover Rose's. I did not see any other feedback from folks, but we can gather more questions today if we need to.
Oh, boy. You're putting me on the spot. Can you bring them back or up? Okay, so I'm doing this off the top. I don't have a list right here, but one was
he's bringing it up.
Cynthia,
he's bringing it up.
Yep.
But so in the interest of time, one of them was if you're whatever school, you know, right now I'll just speak from I thought APS made a really good argument why Nottingham would be ideally, you know, the least impact and I won't repeat what their justification was, but to be the swing space. Then it talks about cost to renovate it for swing space, but it's an elementary school to which we're going to swing to an elementary school. So one of my questions was, please better explain why we need any money other than, you know, moving some, you know, whatever the files to wherever the appropriate, but it just doesn't seem like we need to be knocking down walls or whatever. I just wanted to better understand why we would have costs associated with making Nottingham just basically another elementary school. That was one. And then there was a question about, it looks like maybe we have the questions there, was about if Nottingham was, if it goes forward and it is designated as the elementary, I'm sure it wouldn't serve as a middle school swing space or not a high school swing space, but as the elementary swing space, is that in perpetuity? Could anyone put some timeframes on it? And what are the transportation impacts? I didn't see any of that kind of discussion in the awesome report that staff put together on these in the pre-CIP. And then the last one was just, you know, we need a table with acronyms because there's acronyms all the way through this thing. Okay.
Great.
So
thank you, Cynthia. So why don't we, Michael, can you walk through those three questions and address the table of contents on behalf of APS real quick? I don't know is a great answer.
Yeah, I guess I would need context on the first one, because I imagine, is that cost in the report somewhere? That
yes,
dollar
it
amount?
is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I would kind of need context as to like where that is in the report and what it's referencing. So
it's on the table where you lay out the options of where you potential homes for the swing space. So it's on that table where you have that information.
Yeah, I think it's in the appendix. But basically, Michael, the way it broke out was everything else cost $50 million. Nottingham costs 5. And what Cynthia is saying is, if it's an elementary swing space, and it already is an elementary school, why is there even $5 million going into it? So again,
Thank you.
can't-
That's my
you
question.
can't answer it here, but right. But if you can't answer that here, that's no problem. But that's the context of the question.
Yeah, I mean,
for
I would
answering.
I would say just off the top of my head that, you know, and obviously this isn't, I would like to say I don't really know how they came up with that number, but it would probably be associated with the cost of moving all of the different stuff around, because you don't know what type of program might be going in there. I know you're saying it's like for like, elementary school for elementary school. But there is things that would have to take place based on types of programs that would be available. For instance, let's say you're moving a school that has a primarily large special education or pre-K, and maybe Nottingham doesn't have that. So you would have to do some sort of internal modifications, and you would have to do some sort of compensation to the building in order to, you know, accommodate that particular group of students. The other thing that's probably associated with it is just the cost in transportation, having to go ahead and, you know, bus children across the county potentially.
Okay, so
those are-
Michael, that's, put a pencil to that, because I didn't see transportation mentioned anywhere, which is one of my questions. So that would be, I think, so I don't know how you want to do this, Kelly, if you're prioritizing what the
No, that's
FAC
what-
is going to
what
be
I was gonna
asking,
say is-
but
If I
I
can,
would,
Cynthia, what I was going to say is, like, I'm sorry, I didn't talk over you. I didn't mean, I don't intentionally
No,
mean
go
to do this,
ahead.
but I think I know where you're going. Michael, I think this is a question we'd like answered. And these are all related. So I think what Cynthia is saying is a little more detail around the 5 million, you know, like just generalities, you know, fine. But like, is it transportation? Is it a yearly remodification? Is it 5 million every time they move in? Is it 5 million one time to like slap a coat of paint on and
Sure.
move
Yeah.
some, relocatables?
totally-
Like that would be a good one.
Kelly, I totally get
thank
what
you, Kelly.
I totally get what you're saying. Cynthia, I totally get what you're saying. I think this is a great question that you guys should go ahead and push forward. Right?
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt. I raised my hand and no one saw me, so I'm just.
Yeah,
gonna-
no, I was going to call on you next. I'm sorry, that just went long. Go ahead.
Our goal is not to ask Michael to ask all these questions, right? Our goal is to determine, is this a good question and should we add more info to the question, right? Okay, so it seems to me that we all agree this is a good question and potentially we'd like to add more to it. Is that what I'm hearing? Because I'm just trying to figure out how we can like plug through questions. Because if we discuss all of them, as long as we just discuss that one, we're not going to get through very many.
Yeah, so here's a thought. On this particular one, what I would say is, and I gotta go find a plug. What I would say on this particular one is, Michael, we can either reword it or it can be combined into that and I can resend it. So maybe the action is for me to take and reword this and send it out in a consolidated version for the FAC. So I told Michael and Ariana not to post these right away and answer them because they'd be answering all of them. So I think I understand now what Cynthia is asking. So I will take this as an action and reword this whole thing into a little more detailed question and make it a FAC question. And I'll send that to you all and vet it first just to make sure I worded it correctly. Does that sound good?
Then I think Zach had an addition here in the chat. So his additional question is about the unrelocatables. So maybe add that in as well.
Go ahead, Zach. Is there anything? Yeah. Do you want to just add that, Zach, or do you want to actually? Is there a question that you need answered?
I think it probably falls under wanting more detail on the 5 million.
Okay. Yeah.
And then,
I think along the lines of what I was saying, like, is it 5 million a year? Is it 5 million one time? That type of thing. Did I lose you? Hello?
Well,
Zach?
you know, please look at all of my questions because they do, this is me again, you know, so that these kinds of issues aren't dropped because the, you know, whether or not it's permanent It's meaning, we don't know if it's, to be used 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. What, I just, when I'm going to shut up because you're going to rewrite it and we'll see what you come up with. Thank you for considering it.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Cynthia, and I will, and we'll get feedback one more time on the final turn. Let's go to the other one with Rosa. She's got kind of a lot more detail. And by the way, everyone, I apologize for the somewhat disorganization at the meeting. There's no silver bullet on this. It's not like our regular planned FAC meetings where Michael and I and Rosa have time to kind of think of an agenda. So please bear with us. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, where to begin?
Can you all see that? Can you all see all those questions in there?
Yeah. Hey, here's a
Yeah.
thought. I don't know if it would, because yeah, that's a lot of questions. I wonder.
Oh, it keeps going.
Yeah. Why don't maybe I'm trying to think of like how we can use tools to our advantage. Like, why don't we put these into like a Google Docs, and then everyone can go in and like edit and add stuff, and then maybe we can, once we've all looked through and added things, we can maybe like vote on them. I don't know, or suggest that certain
Well,
ones.
can I ask a question? Why, so I want to pick up, because this is one of the things about voting. Is there anything that constrains how many questions we ask?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. We could just submit them all.
No.
I mean, why don't we just submit it?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
still
we
have
can
to
do
add
that.
in more. I admit I didn't do my homework. I am bad. But I would like
Yeah,
to
so-
add in questions that
Yeah,
aren't
I've
covered.
got like a whole list of questions here too that I did not send prior to the meeting, but I did prepare a list that I've also got that I can send.
Making me feel better, Zach.
So I think
Okay.
probably, I would like to make a recommendation. Anybody who has questions, because we were all given a deadline. So as a courtesy, send your questions in. Someone needs to put them in one document, and then we need to, if you like, to be given 24 hours to reread through them to see if any of them causes us concern. If they don't, they probably should all be submitted.
I agree.
Yeah, I think, is it Kateri or Cattery? I apologize. I should
Think
know
battery
that.
like battery.
Cattery?
Yep. Rhymes with
Yeah.
battery.
So Cattery, I don't want to do a Google Doc.
Okay.
Just because of I don't even know the legalities around that, and I'm sure there are none, and I'm being weirdly paranoid. What we can do, it's more efficient your way. I agree. But what we can do, sorry, I had to go find a plug. This is weird. What we can do is I'm going to take all these questions. I'm going to post them in by person into a document, because we only had 2 responses from other folks. Zach, if you've got questions, that'll be 3. Adam, same thing. And of course, I can add. Cattery, you can add. But what I would say then is, why don't we say holistically, I'm going to put these in an overall document. I'm going to give the group until, I'll give you till next Tuesday, because I'm going on vacation, and I'm not going to do this on vacation. So, but I will do the meeting on vacation. So I'll give you till next Tuesday. And any questions that we want added in, I'll put in a final document. I will send it around. That way people can make comments on it, and then I can roll those in and move on. Now, having said that, Michael, can we do a Google Doc, or is that a bad idea? That's a better question.
So typically Google Docs have to be owned and operated by someone outside of APS. So
Okay.
either that's the chair, or I create what I like to call a burner Google Doc, which is just like a document that exists that I set up based on an email that I create.
So it can be done. It's not legal.
Yeah.
There's no legal.
Yeah,
only give like us access. You can grant certain people access, and so you would grant just access only to the people on the FAC.
Yeah, we've
So
done
I'll
it.
take the action.
Mhm.
I think Rose has done it too, right, Michael?
And I've done it too. I can help too if you want me to.
Yeah, it's up to y'all. If y'all want to go ahead and set one up, you can go ahead and do that. The problem, if we ever as APS employees set it up, I can't give anyone access because it's an APS account. So the only way you can get access to it is through an APS account, and you don't most likely want to use your kid's account to access stuff like that. So, and not everyone has students or children still in the system. So that's the problem with that. So that's why I was suggesting either I do it or anyone in this group can set one up.
Kettering, you want to volunteer?
I can do it.
Okay.
Okay, before we go there, can I just ask a question here? What is the purpose of this exercise we're doing and the comment about us making comments? Wasn't the question that all of us are equally valued FAC members, and
Yes.
whether or not it's one question or 20 questions that they are, put into a document and it's forwarded, these are our questions. Is it
Two main
what
things.
is,
Two main things, Cynthia. I can
let
tell
me hear
you.
from
I
the
can tell you
chair,
right
please.
now. Sorry. I'll tell you two things. One is, if we put it in a Google Doc and everyone can see it, if you see a question that's already in there, you don't have to repeat it, so that there's not two questions of the same, and that doesn't force APS to go through it. The second thing is not about the comments, is not commenting and saying your question's stupid. It's saying, this is a great question, and I would like to see this detail. So your $5 million, I would have added 3 bullets and said, specifically, and then I would put Kelly note, I would like to see, is it every year or one time? Why is it 5 million? I agree. Why is it 5 million in the first place? What was entailed in that, and so on. And then, in that way, you could see what I wrote, and, we could.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. That makes sense. I think it's important when you send out the document to state, because there's very few of us on this call, what the purpose
Right.
of this review is.
Right, I'll do that. And I know I'm frozen right now on the screen, but I will do that, and I will be very clear. This is what I was getting. It was funny with the meeting this past week. You could only do a thumbs up. I had a real problem with that because some of the comments were rude, and you couldn't even thumbs down them, and it was driving me nuts. Because the guidance from me to this little group would be, you can add to, and you can add questions, and you can add to other people's comments. We're not going to comment on whether or not the comment is valid. That will leave to APS. And then I think
Thank
you're right, Cynthia. Go ahead, Zach.
Thanks. I have a question, not about the questions, but more about one of the recommendations in the document. Maybe Michael can answer it. The recommendation to move the middle school immersion program, where did that idea originate from? Was it from the academic side, or was it from more the administrative operations side?
Great question, Zach. And
Thanks.
the academic side, there was a visioning process that was done, and I'll get the information and I'll put it on in the chat. That was done on the academics with the actual immersion families. This was done a few years ago, and they had recommendations, just academic recommendations. However, in that document, apparently on, I believe, page 26, there's a mention of having the immersion program in a central location.
Okay. So I guess
And this is Cynthia. That was the thing that I picked up. If you'd asked me when I read through it, I would have said they are that you can clearly see that Gunston is way over bursting at the seams with people, and that putting it more central, finding a school that's more central that could accommodate it, helps relieve that burden, centralize, anyway, I'm sorry, it made sense to me. I've
Okay.
drunk the Kool-Aid, Michael.
The reason why I was asking the question was I guess I wanted to get to the point of moving the immersion program is going to happen, I'll say. I guess we don't have the option to suggest that they just move ahead with middle school boundary changes without the immersion move.
Can I jump in?
Or with maybe just the Montessori move too.
Yeah, I think, Kateri, go ahead, because I think that's what Pretty asked for.
Yeah, I think so. I was going to add, because I will tell you, I feel kind of like in a weird position on this topic, right? Is that because I am in South Arlington and we are
Me
really
too.
good. Yeah, and we're going to be overcrowded, right? Like Gunston, I know all the people who have Gunston's like their local school, right? But I also personally, I don't want the immersion program to move, and I think it's unfortunate for us to lose it from South Arlington. And I think it's going to cause a lot of I obviously I think there's a lot of challenges, and I heard in the meeting that people are very, very upset about the boundary change, as I think any parent would be, right? Like my daughter, literally, we passed by Gunston every week, and she says, I can't wait to walk to Gunston, right? And so I think it's going to be, I think that's a very heated topic, and what I gather from the pre-CIP is there still is room for us to kind of suggest modifications. And I also find that whole section, parts of it, very confusing, because they mention that the possibility of doing 2 schools is a staff recommendation, but then in the briefing that happened on Monday, they acted as though that had been ruled out. But that's not what the pre-CIP said. The pre-CIP said that still was a possible course of action. So I do seem, and it seems to me like there's still room for conversation on that, and certainly there's room for us to question some of those assumptions. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Kateri, that last thing that you spoke about, that was recommendation from F&O as to split the program, and that was shut down.
Who's F&O?
That's me.
Oh,
Facilities and operations.
thank you. That's a great idea. Well, so
But
here's
but they didn't want to. They didn't want to do that because of well, what I was told was because has to do with the academics.
So that apparently came out of that visioning stuff which I will tell you, and you probably remember it too, Zach, there was all this discussion of the visioning. I didn't join it. I thought it was just about, having more like Spanish than English and so forth and so on. I had no idea that there would be any talk about forcing the middle school to like not be separated and moving it.
Yeah.
And to me,
I agree with you, Kateri, and I guess Michael, did academic or teaching and learning, did they have any input on the 2, if it was to stay at 2 locations at the middle school level?
What was that again, Zach?
Did teaching and learning have any comment on 2 separate programs at the middle school level, or did they want to keep it as one program?
Yeah, they wanted to keep it at one program.
Okay.
So, but this is interesting too. So Lisa said in the meeting Monday, because someone asked this, and she said that until it reached a certain capacity, so if I recall correctly, it's at 340 right now, and or 348 or something like that. And they said that if it reached 400, then they would consider splitting it into 2 middle schools, 200 and 200. But that to me, I think about this and I say, one of the big issues that they say with it being so far south in the county is that all these people opt out. So then wouldn't we then assume that we'd be hitting that 50 more kids if we separated it and put part of it in the northern part where like the people would get access? I don't know. I just think there's some like kind of weird assumptions and lack of clarity. And so I plan to ask lots of questions on the topic.
Yeah,
And
I'm trying to find that visioning report, and I'm having a really hard time. So what I'll probably do is I'll look for it tomorrow and I'll send it to the group.
And I gathered that one of the main recommendations was that it be they keep it together or something.
Yeah.
But that to me seems like if you can't do it, you can't do it. There are other factors at play too.
Yeah, I also wonder if they want to separate it based on a lot of times when you bring option programs in, and I know this from the Montessori side, it messes with the school's statistics in weird ways. Like the students that do immersion might be a different capability, for lack of a better word, than maybe the general population of the rest of the school, and it could prevent them from getting the services they need. This happened to Drew, and they were, as far as I'm told, they were happy that Montessori left, because then they were able to, one, have more room, and two, have a capability of showing the true statistics so they get the support that they needed. And I don't know. I have to relook at the middle school boundary change and moving immersion, but it sounds like Kateri and Zach, that's a question that should be added from us, in terms of the boundary changes. So, okay. Let's see. I think we covered swing space in middle school in general terms. I realize not specifically. Rosa clearly was the thing. I mean, if you see her document, it's highly annotated. It's a sight to behold. But I would ask that, we had a deadline. Sophia's right. I put in the chat here, and I say this to anyone watching the recording, we will take additional comments. We, the FAC, we, the Google Doc, will take additional comments until close of business on August 8th. Thanks, Adam. At close of business, which in my mind is 5 p.m. That gives Kateri and me possibly the evening to just take a look at what was put in, vet it, and then republish it to the group by Wednesday. And then what I would like to do then is not wait until the next meeting to push them over to APS, but just, hey, everybody, take a look. Any last comments, get them in there. Like not more questions, but just take a look at the document, see if we're happy with it. And then we get it to APS by next Thursday, basically a week from today. And that way the questions will be out there, they can get answered. And then our homework for next week can be, I don't know, to me, it could be reading all the FAC questions, the FAQs, and coming back with any additions that we want to add. I'd like to go back to the group here and see what would you like to, assuming we've read the CIP, assuming you've read the document, what would you like to see in our final meeting before we start crafting the FAC recommendations? In other words, what do we want to talk about next week that will get us to a point where we can start making recommendations? Anyone want to start? Kateri, you're on mute. Go ahead.
Totally on mute. So I think so one, the other question is, if we've sent off our questions, when do we expect those to be answered? Like they said 72 hours or something, so 3 days. But will they answer them to us, or are they gonna like post them on the
They'll
FAQ?
post them online and they'll be answered online. But Michael, do you know what the turnaround is?
Yeah, I'm just quoting what planning and evaluation said, and that was 72 hours. Tried to get clarity on that because I don't work 24 hours a day. So
No, they did say that in the last meeting, because I actually listened to that, guys, before
they
coming.
did,
3 days.
I warned them that was meaning that you're working all the time, and I mean
3 business days, right?
So I get,
but what I would say then is, if it's 3 to 5 days, it's still before our next meeting.
yeah.
So the homework could be read the FAQ, read the current FAQs, and then when ours are posted, we will have the answers, and/or we can discuss them in the meeting as part of our agenda. As part of it.
I have another question kind of regarding those questions. Has this document been, I assume it's been reviewed internally by APS, but like, are all the recommendations that are in the document are things that like every other department feels that they can accomplish what's being proposed? So teaching and learning, academics, they all feel okay with these changes. You, Michael, transportation feels okay with these things. I want to make sure we're getting the staff input on this as well.
It's a tricky situation. That's a loaded question, Zach.
And
Because
we're being recorded.
Yeah, I know, and it'll be recorded. And it is, we have mentioned in this pre-CIP some of the concerns that facilities and operations has. And we've shared those concerns with planning evaluation when they developed this. So that's all I'm going to say.
So Michael, let me ask you, let me take Zach's question and just turn it back on you, maybe for a second portion of this is, would next week having a discussion about those differences, those seams, if you will, between staff be a worthwhile discussion so that we can maybe the FAC can kind of tease some of that stuff out, both with community feedback, but from the FAQs and whatnot, but also like hearing what staff is thinking about in terms of the seams between options and what the actual trade space is. Because when I think about it, it could either be a done deal and this is just a rubber stamp, which ideally it's not, because you all just brief the community, so we want your feedback. But you've given your best effort and probably had your own compromises to make and just even producing the report. So where is the true gray space? What that I think would be a good discussion topic for the next meeting as well. Where is their flexibility and where is there not?
So yeah, and I would like to also say that when we have a standing weekly meeting with planning and evaluation with Lisa's team, and it wasn't this week, maybe it was the week before. These are recommendations, right? This isn't the CIP. There's still plenty of room and there's still plenty of time for these recommendations to be somehow adjusted. So, for instance, I'm working on a transportation plan for Nottingham as swing space.
Right. So that goes back to Cynthia's point of where's the transportation plan for Nottingham, and it's not done yet. So we don't know. The other thing I want to bring up as part of that is when I was talking to Mary and Rose and I were talking to Mary, like you've heard of the 2-body versus the 3-body problem. And when you get beyond 2 bodies, it's very hard to model things. Every time you shut something down and turn something on and move something, you're already into a 3-body or a multi-body problem. So that's where I think waiting until the long range plan guidance comes out, then you could see like, okay, it would cost $50 million to renovate this school and $30 million over here to update this one. Could you, is it a 1-for-1 swap? Are you creating, a trade-off here that you don't want to make there? Or are you creating a benefit by doing X and Y at the same time? So I think if we could put that as a topic, Michael, for the next meeting and look at maybe Lisa, I don't know if Lisa would attend or one of her staff, and we could, in any other division that has like, okay, APS put this document out, but these are the things that as we get into the CIP, we really got to answer, because then we, the subcommittee here, will have a couple of weeks to think through it and say, okay, what does the FAC really think about this? Or the FAC think about this? And how do we suggest we move forward in terms of addressing these gray areas? Like our recommendation as an example to the board could be, there are 10 gray areas here that you really need to give guidance to APS on, like figure it out, or ask us to help you figure it out. Or we could say, these are gray spaces between it, but as a board or as a FAC, we think that this is a better option or, we concur here, we don't concur there. So like, I would like to see that in the next meeting. If we could get you and a couple other people that are more representative, like of the main APS staff involved in this, then I think we could have a fulsome discussion about that rate space. Does anyone not agree with that?
Yeah, we'll have to have the meeting on a non-Thursday. So
That's
let's
fine.
just-
We can move
let's
it.
start with
Like I said, we could move it.
Okay.
We could have moved these two, but I think you were trying to get out of the school board meeting. So
We only have
I'm just
one
kidding.
item on
All
there,
right.
so.
all right. We have 2 minutes left, and I really want to be respectful of time, and I'm going to turn to a pumpkin anyway. So what I want to say is, again, I apologize that these are not very organized. It will be more organized during the year, but we're trying to get our feet under us. And the biggest thing that we can do right now, our next meeting's in 2 weeks. It's supposed to be 2 Thursdays from now, but if we shift it to, say, a Wednesday or a Tuesday or something, we're just trying to keep it on a 2-week cycle so that we just give people gates. Not necessarily that they have to attend the meeting, but that they know a meeting occurred and there was an action item that came out of it. Now there's a Google Doc, right? Now we can formalize our questions. And so category the action that came out of this meeting, I think very important, thank you for the contribution, is you host the Google Doc, we'll get it posted, we'll post the timeline, we'll send it out to the FAC only, plus APS, like, Michael and Ileana specifically. And then we'll give everyone a deadline at 5 o'clock, it's closed. We'll put a pin in it. I'll take a review and make any modifications. I'll send it back out to everyone just for like a quick look, like, did you see anything modified that you didn't, or not adding anything more? And then we'll try to get it to you, Michael, I think by Wednesday. That'll give you Thursday, Friday, and, the following week. And then ideally we'll meet like Wednesday, or Tuesday, whatever works for your schedule. Whoever can show up will show up. We'll record that meeting. And then from that point on, I will be, and maybe together we'll be drafting a FAC recommendation that we will then review at the end of August meeting, or I think it's the first week of September. And then the first official FAC meeting will be on September 12th, which will be right after the planning guidance, the long range planning guidance comes out, and after the last tabletop session. That meeting, we're going to vote on our pre-CIP guidance, which will be submitted to the school board on September 15th. And then they do all their voting stuff. We do our meetings, and they give us CIP guidance to work on for the rest of the year starting October. So that's the summary. 7:30. By exception, does anyone have a question? Please raise your hand if you do. I'll give you a few seconds here to press the button. Anyone? Okay. Thank you all for attending tonight. I really appreciate your feedback. And Kateri, let me know if you need the rest of the list of the FAC members. Last thing to everybody, if you have a friend or a colleague, someone, like interested in the FAC, please invite them to apply. We do need a couple more members to have our quorums, robust conversation. So that's it.
Yeah.
Have a great night, everybody. And go ahead, Michael.
Bye.
If you want to
Thanks.
go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing is that tonight they made at the school board, they made appointments to the advisory committees, and we didn't have the appointment of the individual that I thought we were going to have. And I asked about that, and I didn't hear anything back. So I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
So we did get someone though appointed.
Yeah. We got an application, and we reviewed the application, and we said, please notify the individual that we would like them to be part of the, FAC. And I haven't heard anything.
Michael, could you send me a quick note about that
Yeah.
offline? And then
Mhm.
if necessary, I'll reach out to Mary and just check with her on it.
Yep.
All right, and then Kelly, send me those emails you have, and I will just cut and paste that into the box, which I have already made. And you have
I'll do that
access,
right after this.
and I'm just going to use the email distro and give everyone on that access once I add the questions. Okay. And then you just go in and add any instructions that I missed. Okay.
I'll do that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, all.
Thank you. Good night.
So.
Bye-bye.
Bye.